So thus far, we have looked at what this course is not. We've also looked at effective reading habits and what you're going to get out of good reading. And we've also looked at Bloom's taxonomy and how to move from stage to stage of good thinking about what it is you're reading with action verbs. Now we're going to talk about understanding your understanding. So what does it mean to understand what you think you understand or what you might want to understand? Understanding is a kind of a tricky subject to deal with, but let's break it down and see what we can come up with. So number one of the ways you understand understanding is to understand in the sense of dissection or dissimulation. So when I read Walter Isaacson's book, The Innovators, in The Innovators, he regularly would talk about different people who develop different aspects of computing, personal computers, artificial intelligence, networking, the internet, and things like that. And what he regularly pointed out was that some of these guys would tear radios apart, tear TVs apart, tear apart various things in order to understand. So in biology, maybe you did this in your early high school biology class, or even as a medical doctor, you dissect. You dissect the frog, you dissect the cadaver. And in doing that, you have hands-on the inner gut workings of something, no pun intended regarding cadavers, but you get the inner workings of something. You are taking apart, you are disassembling in order to understand something in all of its makeup, in all of its constituent parts. So when reading to understand, ideas need to be disassembled into their parts. Then the whole in all of its little bits and pieces can be understood. Now, in one sense, that's what Richard Weaver here is doing in Ideas Have Consequences. He is taking different ideas. I can even show you here from the table of contents. Fragmentation and obsession, egotism in work and art, the Great Stereopticon, which is about basically modern day social media, spoiled child psychology, the power of the word, piety and justice. He's taking different ideas, and in the course of the chapter, he breaks them down so you can get a sense of their constituent parts, and then, of course, why there are consequences to certain ways of thinking or certain ideas being implemented into people's actionable lives. The second thing that you need to remember about understanding is not that you tear something apart or you dissect or you dismember, but that you assemble or that you intertwine or that you weave together. So once you've got it apart, you need to now put it back together, and it may go back together in a surprisingly new way. So think about putting a puzzle together. You've got the photograph on the box, which shows you what the puzzle is supposed to look like, but now you're trying to find all the little parts to get them all together so that it can be done in a complete way. So this idea or concept from a book, so think about this. You're reading a book, so this idea, this concept from the book of this author works well with the idea from a book by that author or by a book by the same author. Or does it conflict? So you're trying to come to understand something, and things need to be tested. Ideas, concepts, philosophies all need to be tested. There might be conflict that comes in order to push, pull, prod, poke, pull apart. Is there an integrity there when it's all put back together again? Does it work well as a whole? So for understanding to fully happen, you've got to take it all apart, and then you've got to put it all back together again. And you may need to draw from other areas of thought or other ideas to get it back together again. Because ultimately, it's a transference from one mind, i.e. the author, to another mind, i.e. you, the reader. So I'm trying to get the ideas out of this guy's head into my head. And sometimes that can be a daunting task. So the author took apart and reassembled all of the concepts, ideas, trains of thought, logic, reasoning, all these things he deemed necessary to package into his book. It is his best attempt to present his mind on the subject. It may be his best attempt, but it may not be the best way. So that's part of our challenge, is that when you're reading, I came across something the other day that I read, and I was like, that's not the best way to explain that. And I felt like the author dropped the ball on that particular point because he wasn't coming at it in the right way. Maybe I had information he didn't have. I had read other things that he hadn't read. I felt like he had a weak argument on a particular point. Because I understood something more fully somewhere else that in my mind counteracted or kind of diffused or disqualified what it was he was saying. Your task is to engage your mind on the text to best understand the mind of the author as presented in the text. So you dissect it and then reword it for yourself. And that's a good habit to get into. Take what's written, reword it into your own way of thinking. Try to get behind the text to a degree. Try to see how it's all been put together. That is your goal. So understanding is to, in essence, tear it all apart, put it all back together again. If you do those two steps, if you work at taking apart the ideas presented by the author and then putting them back together, it may be in your own words, your own way of understanding, then or in the process of understanding, then you'll go a long way into really making that book your own.